Yell at me if I fade off. Now, there are three things that motivate us to monitor shorebirds: love of birds, conservation ethic, and building a database to combat inappropriate development. Let's look at the Hunter Estuary and how it has changed since Europeans first arrived. New South Wales, like it or not, was seen as a blank canvas, ready for exploitation. The Hunter Estuary was a relatively shallow waterway, suitable for steamships to sail all the way up to Maitland, and a complex of islands in the lower Hunter provided ideal habitat for migratory shorebirds and waterbirds. Ash Island was named after the tall ash trees flourishing in rainforest on the island. Discovered in 1800, all the ash and cedar trees had been felled by 1820. Now, the first land grant on Ash Island was to Alexander Walker Scott in 1829. An entomologist and entrepreneur, he built a house there and lived with his wife and two daughters, renowned for hospitality to travelling botanists, zoologists, nature lovers and collectors, including John and Elizabeth Gould. Scott brought farmers from Germany to tend vineyards and graze cattle over Ash Island, a lifestyle that continued for about 30 years. His daughters produced beautiful illustrations of the butterflies and moths on Ash Island, and these were subsequently described and published by Scott. From the 1860s, these islands were subdivided into smaller holdings. The settlers taking up these holdings were families struggling to make a living. In the 1891 census, there were 84 families living on these islands in the lower Hunter. And these settlers survived tides and floods until the devastating 1955 floods finally wiped out their livability. Meanwhile, in 1915, down here in the south arm of the Hunter River, BHP opened up its works. By the 1950s, land reclamation was proceeding at the downstream end of the islands, and using dredge spoil from harbour maintenance works and blast furnace slag for training walls, several islands were amalgamated to provide sites for future shiploading, manufacturing and waste disposal. And this southern amalgamation of islands was called Kooragang Island. And the future road leading to Stockton Bridge would go across here. So you can see there was a lot of reclamation to go on. And then in 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, raising awareness of the impacts of unfettered industrial development and pollution. And this was a clarion call for people to take action to conserve the natural environment. In the 1960s, training walls were constructed from blast furnace slag along the northern margin of Kooragang Island. And this was to make the navigable channel more defined and to provide for future reclamation. You can see that the areas here that are still water were designed to be infilled for land. And this passage here this is a Stockton Bridge that was built in 1972. And the Shelley sand patch at the eastern abutment became Stockton Sandspit, a favoured roost site for shorebirds. But in the early 70s, Fred Van Gessel, Tom Kendall and Glenn Holmes, among others, were catching and banding birds in here behind Kooragang dikes. They were thrilled by the numbers of shorebirds they were counting. 2,000 curlew sandpipers, 4,000 godwits, and once, Fred said, 600 wimble stood along the dikes. Stockton Sandspit was also the rage. This is Fred's slide of godwits at Stockton Sandspit back in the 70s. And these are godwits on the Kooragang dikes. But all was not well. Mounting complaints about air pollution from the residents in Stockton and Mayfield led to an inquiry into pollution from Kooragang Island. And this inquiry was undertaken by E.J. Coffey, Commissioner under the terms of the State Pollution Control Commission Act. In June 1972, Fred, who was working for BHP, took sick leave for a day to present his shorebird counts and habitat knowledge to the Coffee Inquiry. His submissions made the newspapers and blew his sick leave out the window. The Canberra Times reported Fred as saying, there are 163 species of birds on the mudflats and associated areas, and 45 species breed there. Birds from Alaska, Asia and Japan migrate to these mudflats and mangrove swamps, and there is an international obligation to protect their habitat. He also asserted, because he didn't know about northwestern Australia, that nowhere else in New South Wales or Australia is there an area that accounts for migratory species in such number. Fred and the president of the Newcastle Flora and Fauna Society, Mr. Dorman, asked the inquiry for a reserve of about 900 acres adjoining the Hunter River. Their submissions were critical in raising awareness of the importance of parts of Kooragang Island and the Hunter Estuary for shorebirds, and for preserving the area beside the dikes from being filled with noxious wastes. In the 1980s, the Australasian Way to Study group began counting shorebirds in summer and winter to keep track of populations. Kooragang Nature Reserve was gazetted in 1983, and it included Stockton Sandspit, the area behind the dikes, all this green stuff right out to the end of Ash Island, and a lot of Fullerton Cove as well. So that was the Kooragang Nature Reserve, a result 10 years later from the Coffee Report, and it was included in the Ramsar list of internationally important wetlands in 1984. And then the Kooragang Wetland Rehabilitation Project commenced in 1993, as well as rehabilitating Ash Island. You know, those visions of ash and cedar rainforests, that was a vision. And Stockton Sandspit also became a rehabilitation focus, because it was no longer just a shelly patch, it was invaded by mangroves. So that was where Stockton Sandspit was, and this is after the rehabilitation has taken place. David Gearing's lagoon has been built, and the mangroves have been removed from the fringe. The scales of justice seem to tip in favour of conservation, but nothing is forever. Demands for land for industrial development continued. Expansion of coal mining in the Upper Hunter Valley required more coal loading facilities on Kooragang Island. The harbour needed deeper dredging to accommodate larger coal ships. And then Clive Palmer came down from Queensland and proposed construction of a steelworks at Tomago, with a transport corridor across Ash Island. Oh, yeah, and there was Big Pond. Big Pond was a waste disposal area on Kooragang Island. It was favoured by small shorebirds like redneck stinks and curlew sandpipers. The Newcastle Coal Infrastructure Group had their eyes on it as a giant stockpile of coal. So, that's what rehabilitation of Stockton Sandspit did, got the birds back. In 1998, Phil Straw, infamous avifauna researcher, was consulting to Port Botany on proposed changes to their port loading facilities. He used the Hunter Estuary as a control site, and he counted shorebirds here regularly. Phil wanted those counts to continue when his project was complete. So he invited Chris and me to come out in his boat to survey the birds on the dikes. Again, that's where the dikes are. Lovely aerial shot to show you what a marvellous wall, straight wall of BHP slag is. Fantastic. Okay. As we motored alongside the dikes, Phil pointed out godwits, curlews, knobs, and then he said, okay, count them. Counting camouflage birds from a moving boat is not easy, but we tried. How many godwits? Asked Phil when we got to the end of the dikes. 1,400, I replied. Is that all? He said. Try again. Up and down we went until eventually we counted the 2,000 godwits that were present that day, and we were hooked. Regular counts of all the shorebirds in the estuary would give us the data we needed to combat inappropriate development in the Hunter Estuary. And if we couldn't stop the development, we could bargain for compensatory habitat. And so the monthly shorebird count started in our rubber ducky with Anne Lindsay as our mentor and database custodian. Our team of 3 counted the dikes, Stockton Sandspit and Big Pond while it lasted, while Alan Stewart and his helpers counted Ash Island. 25 years later, the driving forces to continue counting are still there. It's love of birds, a strong conservation ethic, and a rigorous database to justify habitat protection. It's a fantastic achievement for the Hunter Bird Service Club. Thank you.
My name's Anne, and I've been bird watching now for about 50 years. And I first came to bird watching when I was living in Sydney. And I just happened to go out on an outing and I saw a spotted pardalote and a robin. And from that moment I was hooked on birds.
My name's Alan. I grew up in WA and in suburban Perth and not any birds. I moved to Canberra about just over 40 years ago and discovered all these birds in my yard that I had no idea what they were, and I started looking to try and work out what they were, and suddenly found myself addicted to bird watching.
I'm Chris, and I got into bird watching mainly because I was collecting birds' eggs, which he did at my age, young age. And after that, I became very addicted to birds.
And I'm with my mate Chris. We're both geologists, we both love being outdoors, and we encourage each other with bird watching. Because we've got a scientific background, we like collecting data, information, and we're also conservationists. And the only way we knew to effectively lobby for conservation was to have scientific data to back up our pleas for habitat conservation. I can't exactly remember how we 4 became involved. What I do remember was doing some surveys with David Gearing and Phil Straw on the river, going along the Kooragang dikes and counting shorebirds there. And at some point in a conversation with Phil Straw, he said, you guys ought to be doing shorebird surveys in the Hunter because you're an important area. So that's the bit I remember. Perhaps the others can add to that a little bit. Yeah, I checked with Phil this morning, and at that time, in the late 1990s, Phil Straw was working on compensatory habitat for development of Botany Bay, because Botany Bay shipping terminal was going to be planted on an area which was used by shorebirds. And as part of Phil's understanding of the needs of shorebird habitat, he extended his surveys up to the Hunter so that he had a comparison for development in Botany Bay and little development at that stage in the Hunter. And as he was going up and counting the birds, he encouraged all of us to come with him, and he knew that Chris and I were boat-friendly people and were able to cope with watery sort of surveys. But we just had to get over that hump of counting lots and lots of shorebirds on the dikes. So Phil took us out in his boat and he said, okay, count the godwits. We came up with 1,500. Phil said, not enough, count again. And so gradually we got competence and we got confidence to count the shorebirds. Those days it was Chris, Liz and I would do the dikes in the little rubber ducky, and then we'd park that, dash over to Stockton Sandspit and count the birds there. So we were actually doing 5 sites and hoping in the meantime that the birds didn't move from one side to the other. And what I remember a lot about going on those dike surveys with Chris and Liz was we went out in all weather. It didn't matter whether it was calm and beautiful or whether there was a hurricane blowing. We still went. We had some fairly hair-raising time. She used to prepare herself with a great big tarpaulin so she could sit in the front of the rubber ducky and be sheltered from the spray.
And I was sheltered from the spray because Anne was in front of me.
One stage we thought of providing her with a snorkel and a mask, but she balked at that. And as Liz also mentioned, the challenge, of course, was trying to get some kind of accurate count. The other thing we did was survey Big Pond before NCIG was an event. And Big Pond was a really important area for things like black-winged still. Abbasid, early sandpipers, marshes. Yeah, it was really significant.
Well, it was just the four of us, but then other people used to come out to Ash Island. We gradually got people who were a bit more proficient, and then people like Jenny Powers, for example, then started to do the sand split as a separate activity. So the crew got bigger.
Yeah, Jenny Powers and Chris Easter, they did the sand spit for many years. And also Terry Lindsay had come back to the estuary at that time, and he used to go with them. And he, I think, was instrumental in showing them a lot about shorebirds at that time. And then it grew to, I think
6
we're
teams now, 200 people roughly.
Yeah, had old folks and older folks, uni students. But anyone who is mobile can do a shorebird survey.
Yeah.
Amanda Lillyman was a uni student at Newcastle Uni. She came out in the little rubber ducky with us and surveyed the dikes, and she got hooked because you could get up pretty close to the birds on the dikes, and she subsequently did a PhD on shorebirds up at Darwin, and she's become very focused on conserving habitat for shorebirds.
She's now the shorebirds person for birdlife.
There you go.
she started it here in the
Started it here in the Hunter, so the sort of the spread of interest goes a long way.
All the results go into bird data, which is the National Archive. So, and we've got every team has got at least one person who's proficient in putting the data in. So each team puts the data in. So it's all in there. It's all feeding into like when ornithologists do national assessments of shorebird numbers and things, about our data is part of that. And plus, we extract it and analyse it ourselves.
Respect our expertise in shorebird matters. So they have been spending a lot of money in restoring habitat on what we call the Kooragang dikes, which is an area where the birds roost during high tide. And also they've taken out mangroves that were enclosing the sand spit, which improves the area for the shorebird.
Another important aspect of accumulating data in a scientific manner is to submit that data to inappropriate developments in the Hunter Estuary and make sure that those developers provide compensatory habitat when they take out shorebird habitat. And a great example of that is NCIG's development of Big Pond for their coal material stockpiles. And the Bird Club has benefited hugely from that development in the sense that they fund publication of Whistler. Anything else, Alan?
Bird report and various other things.
And the other part of their compensatory habitat was to put in mangrove propagule exclusion devices on fish fry flats here on Ash Island. So there are checks and balances in the system. We're losing habitat, but at the same time we're gaining it as well in some senses.
wanted to say a couple of things about the actual sites. I think when we started out, we were doing about 16. I think today there's maybe 14 or 15 sites actually being surveyed.
No, it's like 20.
It's more like 20.
Yeah. Just been getting the data out. So
Okay. So the habitats are changing in different ways. However, it's a bit of a losing battle here and there. For instance, at the sand spit, when we started out, it was mud flats. Then there were mangroves, but they went away. But then we had a lot of shelly beach, and that shelly beach has now turned into a vegetated patch. So it's no longer so suitable for things like red-cap plovers. So the habitats are changing.
Hi, so I'm Dan Williams. I'm the president of HPOC, and yeah, I've been involved in these dike surveys for almost 10 years now. I've got 13 curlew sand.
You got everything, Dan?
I will have in a bit, and then Pacific golden plover, I think there's 35. Yeah. Yep, no, I think I've got them.
It's my name. This is Judy.
How long have you been doing the waterbird surveys?
About 7 years or so, give or take a couple of years. For the conservation of the birds, it's great to get down here and see the flocks of godwits when they fly and just roosting on the rocks. Migratory waders come from many kilometres away north, up in the northern hemisphere. They breed up in the northern hemisphere, and then they fly down here to rest for our summer. And we've got to look after them.
The most memorable experience for myself doing the surveys was shortly after we'd agreed to take them on from Chris and Liz when they departed overseas. Yeah, they brought us out on the boat, and we went with them and to see how it was all done. And yeah, we were treated to a long-toed stint that was present in amongst the regular waders. So that was really quite exciting. It's pretty.
So I hope you take notice here, you see those people in the boat. Geez, they know boats, don't they? So I was going to tell a story about the time when I actually got involved with a boat and doing the dike surveys. So for some time the club would borrow a boat from Koogan Wetland Rehabilitation people, and one day no one had the keys, they couldn't get the boat out, they couldn't get the boat, so it was panic stations. Call went out, has anyone got a boat? I said, well, I haven't, but I've got a mate who's got a boat. So organised with said mate, get the boat. He's telling me all about it. Yeah, I know what to do. Get down there, just where Greg was there, put the boat get down the ramp. Organised Anne and Mike into their buoyancy vests, told them where to sit, because I was the skipper. Yeah, it's got a motor, that's fantastic. Oh, it's got a thing full of petrol, that's great. It's got oars and all that sort of stuff, just in case. Where's that bit of hose that goes from the... What are we going to do? And you know, the tide doesn't wait for anyone. Well, the really good thing about doing the dike surveys is you plonk it, mostly you plonk the boat in the water, the tide's still coming up the river. And when you get up and you do the survey along the front, then you go through the one of the breaches in the wall, and that lets you go and survey for the birds that are facing the other way on the other side of the dikes. So, quick calculation, right now, I reckon we'll get our way to this. grabbed the oars and we rowed. So we're rowing up the river and the tide helping us. And it was really good because the speed that I could manage was just about right for people to count all those birds. Got up to past the bridge, counted all those birds, rowed back. Oh, how good is this? The water is still going through the bridge because the tide behind the dikes is much later than on the river. Paddled through there, not a problem. Up and down in this calmer waters, counting all those birds. Back to the bridge, tide's going out, water's going back the other way. Paddle all the way home. Fantastic. Ham was right, nothing stops the survey.
I'm mostly going to talk about my experience of surveying Tomago, but in the process at the moment of doing a different analysis of the surveys that Hunter Estuary Club have done, and so I just thought this was a great graph to show. Basically, it's just showing survey effort over time. So these are all the sites. This is the number of years. So I have only done until mid-2022. The number of years that each site has been surveyed, and then if this line diagonally that goes through is the number of, if they're surveyed every month for that number of years, what they should be at. And so you can see all these sites up here, Floating Cove Beach, Area E, Stock and Sandspit, the dikes, Fernbay, Stock and Channel. Yeah, very, very high and also quite close. I mean, yeah, not missing much in terms of how it relates up to the number of months. So yeah, I just thought it was worth showing that, just to say, like, massive effort over all these years from everyone who's been involved in those surveys. The sites in red are the ones that I believe are still ongoing, or are going to 2022. So obviously Hexham and Tomago started later in the Saturday surveys, but yeah, still surveyed very frequently. So well done. So I'll move on to the next.
Sorry. No, I'm just taking it in. I'm honest, I mean, these are probably dropped a bit low because you have to have like health and safety inductions and stuff, so career aren't tricky. And these are pretty much done all the time. So was that including COVID? Did we lose a few months during the COVID? No, we didn't lose any. Okay, so we just like the odd randoms throughout the 25 years. Oh, right, okay. There you go.
So yeah, I arrived in Newcastle in 2021 to do a PhD studying shorebirds. So I've been to most of the surveys. I think most of the different areas that are surveyed on the monthly surveys, and just kind of alternated between them. But in March last year, I became more of a regular surveyor of Tomago. But yeah, I just thought I'd talk about Tomago. It can be a challenging and intimidating site. Potentially, it's a lot more walking through uneven ground and potentially water and mud and different things. I think the first time I went with Stephen Cox in 2021, which he did, the northern wetlands as well, so that was several k's of walking. I was in waders because I didn't know how much water there would be, and I believe I got stuck and fell over because that was really the only way to go to then kind of get out of being stuck in the mud. But yeah, it's a beautiful place, and who knows what will be out there every time you go. It might be ducks and lapwings, or one time a black-necked stork, sometimes eastern curlews, the occasion bar-tailed godwit, or greenshanks, red-necked stints, or sharp-tailed sandpipers. So yeah, a variable site, but very important. I think Anne's going to touch on a little bit of that. But yeah, the numbers, it's so important to survey sites, even when the numbers are low or variable. It's still great to have that data. So just one more, I've got one more slide. Yeah, thanks. This is one of my volunteers. We went out to Tomago to look at, as a test site for sampling the invertebrates there, if shorebirds are eating them. Because Tomago fluctuates, we've got the tidal gates, but sometimes they're closed due to the landholders and different things. And so you can see on the picture on the far left, that's the salt marsh, and it really alternates between being nice and fresh and green and dead. Yeah, so just that fluctuation, that change. Alan probably will mention it, but the sharp-tailed sandpipers, when the gates first were opened to Tomago, they just boomed, but decreased again. What we did find when we did go searching, it was very dry when we went out there. You can see this is the main pond, and there was so little water. And this that you can see here, that's a polychaete worm, just floating in the water. And I think that it was so shallow that they just died. We found a patch where there was mud, and we did sample some polychaetes. So there is food there, but likely not enough for a large number of shorebirds, particularly with the fluctuation. I just wanted to, I guess, again illustrate the importance of the habitat in Tomago and what it could be, I guess, just based on, what I've observed being out there. Yeah, I think that's
Just tell me about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the banding in the estuary. As Liz said, Fred Van Gessel started banding shorebirds in the estuary. He first started catching shorebirds in about February 1973, right through to 1997, with a couple of catches in 2024. During 2019, I spoke to Fred about the possibility of banding at that site. And our first shorebirds were actually caught not at the Sandspit, but up in Swan Bay, where we caught an eastern curlew. Since February 22, we've mostly been banding in the Sandspit and a couple of times over on Coordagang, Hexham Swamp and along the pipeline track. And since December 2022, we've had sort of more consistent success. We do not use cannon nets, we use mist nets, so we catch low numbers of birds at a time. But over that time period, since 2022, or since we started, we caught about 109 shorebirds over 13 species. Yep. So, I have got a hard copy of this if anyone wants to have a look at it in the break. But this just shows some of it's not all of the birds that we've caught, but some of the re-sightings for each species. So with the pied oyster catchers, you can see they've seen, since we first caught them, it just happened to be the pair that's currently breeding. So that's very easy now to identify which one's on the nest, whether it's a male or a female. They've been sighted in most months each year since they've been captured. The eastern curlew, we've caught 3 only. They're a very difficult bird to catch. They see the nets, they disappear at the slightest disturbance and don't come back till the time the tide changes. But they've shown some, as a lot of the other birds have shown, some sight fidelity. Curlew sandpipers, we actually went out banding at the end of September and had our first actual recapture in a net, on which that was a curlew sandpiper, so it's been away and come back again. The Pacific golden retrieves, most of those have been seen at the Sandspit. A means it's caught, the green is where it's been caught at the Sandspit, and the month, that's not the actual number of re-sightings, it's just the month that they've been re-sighted. But a couple of the Pacific golden plovers have been seen elsewhere, one by a club member in Marlborough State Conservation Area, and another one just recently on its way back to Newcastle, seen in Bundaberg. So we had a bit of a stopover at a reef on the way back down. With the red-necked datasets, well, we've caught more than that, but they were seen initially, but then the rains came inland and we've hardly seen any datasets since then. So maybe they'll come back, we don't know when. Red-capped plovers, they're a little bit more adventurous. They've been wandering around Area E and also over on the Lorelei lands at Stockton Beach. Sharp-tailed sandpiper, which we caught, and it's been at, again on the pipeline track, and Stockton Borehole, and also Cooley Point. So we've had them in a variety of places. So they're showing a little bit of movement around the estuary. We've had one grey-tailed tatwhale. Nobody's seen it since. So keep looking, everybody.
You missed red knot, did you?
Did I? Yeah. Okay, I did too. It's a red knot. There's some interesting sightings there. We've had two birds that were banded elsewhere. That AO7, the top one, was banded in China, and seen here. The one at the bottom, CDN, that's a Victorian bird, so that was seen, I saw that a couple of weeks ago at Sandspit. But we've also got fitted a transmitter to one red knot this season, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the movements of that, and especially when it comes to the end of the season and they start to migrate again. We don't know, it may even go to New Zealand this year, but we think it overwintered this year. Pied stilts, they've again shown a bit of movement up into Fullerton Cove and over at Stockton Borehole at Taralba. The lapwings seem to be seasonal from those sightings, but we haven't been out every month consistently, or so it's possible that they're around more than what we know. Godwits, we've had some very interesting sightings. So those 3 E's are 3 birds that were seen from April and May in South Korea, and 2 of those birds are now back here. And one of them, one of the birds went to Torban in Queensland before it went to South Korea, which was this one here, I think. And then one of them, this one, stopped over in northeast Brisbane on its way back this year. And the only other one, which is, I don't think is on there, is we've had one double-banded plover, so we're yet to get any re-sightings of that.
We could look out for that on the beach.
You could look out for that on the beach.
It's exciting.
So hopefully you will see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's just a little bit about what we've been doing, and thanks to everybody who's been sending us records of birds that they've seen.
Thanks, Jude.
One of the things that I did want to say was about change, and because habitat is a living thing, inevitably it changes. And some of the changes are really good. Hexham Swamp Rehabilitation Project, Tomago Wetland Rehabilitation Project, thousands, millions of dollars probably put in by the government, etc., volunteers, workers, etc., improved all of the habitat out there, and therefore there have been more birds coming, more shorebirds coming, and also other things like black-legged stork, etc. coming. So those changes are wonderful. Bad changes, Liz alluded to, I think, was the fact that Big Pond became a coal dump. The Stockton sewage ponds, we used to go out there a lot. That was the most wonderful place for curlew sandpipers. And those sewage ponds became decommissioned, and they drained them, of course. And I can remember a fellow from one of the councils, Raymond Tourist up there, Port Stevens maybe, rang me up one day and said, "We've got thousands of little turtles. What will we do with them?" Anyway, I don't know what he did with them. I just said, I think the poor thing's just perished. Anyway, so that some of those changes are really bad. The other changes, of course, that have happened, like Tom Clark and his band of merry people who go out all the time and pluck the mangroves and do all the weeding, and therefore keep what we hope to be shorebird habitat, keep that going, keep it all in control. It's a really hard job. He's always happy to have more volunteers. And then the other thing, of course, is just the dynamic nature of vegetation, etc. Now, while we do, I'll come back to that. Right, so I've just got 3 slides. Now, this alluded to the fact that we do this monitoring because it underpins conservation efforts. And one of the places we talked about already was Stockton Sandspit. If we didn't have the numbers, we wouldn't have been able to put in our submissions and say, you know, the shorebirds aren't coming because there's mangroves here, you've got to get rid of them. And it was just because of that data, I mean, there were other things obviously, that we got the funding, or the powers that be, the land managers got the funding to be able to remove those mangroves, which were being a proper pain in the neck. The other thing I want to show you, who recognises this place? Some people here will recognise it. Big Roderick should know where it is. Lorna knows? Right, okay. So this is Hexham Swan, and this is what we used to call, I'm going to do a whole presentation on this. This is what we used to call one mangrove swan. So I started taking pictures from a culvert. Anyway, there we go. Next one, please, Dan. Same place. This is the same place. This March 24. Now the single mangrove, I couldn't actually get a picture of it because I'm here standing at the culvert. This is actually one mangrove there. So the first photograph was 2009. I think I started going out there regularly in about 2008 or something. Habitat change, natural occurrence. What's happened here is that the tide has been allowed to come back in and brought the mangroves with it. The land managers believed at the time that shorebirds weren't, although shorebirds were always mentioned because they're really important, it wasn't actually a priority. The priority was really having a good project that catered for fisheries as well as many other creatures. It wasn't just about shorebirds. So that's what's happened to a lot of the shorebird habitat out there. Just one more, because I love this photograph, because Mattia sent it to me, and Mattia and I have a long history with Tomago. And this, Tom Van Vessel and Tom Kendall here, has been mentioned before. They were doing, they established way back in the 70s that the Tomago Samphire Flats, as we call it now, was probably a night roost. Then they also turned Tomago wetland into grasslands as well, until they saw the change. And I certainly went out there quite often at night, not at night, but late in the afternoon. And somebody mentioned about the variety of birds. I would just like to add that out there at night time, dull-billed terns come in, because I went out there at least 3 times, but then I got old. I used to go out there by myself, and I decided it probably wasn't a good idea then. But 300 to 400 dull-billed terns come in there and roost. And then I have to come home, so I don't actually see if they actually stay there. But anyway, Mattia sent me that because Mattia can probably speak to that. They had camera traps out there, didn't they, Mattia? And we saw these bar-tailed goblets back again, and there were probably some other species, showing that Tomago is once again a beautiful nocturnal roost. And thank you very much.
And Anjay's up next. Yep.
True confession. I did not join Hunter Estuary Observation Club to do surveys. I joined it for outings. We go to new places and meet new people, we let around with experts. Then something better came along, it was camps. And I haven't missed a camp while I've been in Australia since I went to my first camp at Maldives, and I went there for the 5th time last weekend. After that came the bird guides. So here's some places you can go to, you know what you're looking for, and there's a route around. That was pretty good. And then I saw a little sign on the club site one night, and it said, if you'd like to go to a bird survey, bring this number and see if they'll let you come along. So the first person I ran was Hunter Estuary on Ash Island. And I went along there and with Neville, and they showed me around. It was great, 2 experts in all these areas. So next month, I rang Jack Adams. Went down to the Swansea with Jack and Mandy. Supposedly to go into a boat, but it was too rough, so we walked around, but that was pretty good. Number 3, I rang a person called Anne Lindsay at Hexham. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the 24 sites now, because for some reason I don't know yet, I haven't worked it out. I went on that 3rd month to Hexham, and I went the 4th month, the 5th month, and I've been going for the last 8 years.
It's an unjust survey.
And I think I've inherited it.
You absolutely have.
And I have been allowed out on 2 occasions. When Alan and Ross went to Japan, I had 3 weeks at Ash Island, so that was covered. And then I went twice with Tom. And then my bonus issue was not one of our normal surveys, it was onto the Warramai lands, going around with the rangers and seeing all the birds there. So that was pretty good. But I think Anne said to me, well, convinced me that you need to keep going to the same place because you need to have an idea of what the birds are and you need to see the impact of the seasons. But I'm now coming to the main part for new members. To do surveys, you have to be able to count. And there are a few techniques you can learn about this. 1 to 10's pretty good, even to 20. It's a little bit more difficult when there's 2 of you, because one gets 7, one gets 8. So you're diplomatic. If the expert says 8, you say 8. If they said 7 and you said 8, you say, oh, maybe I was wrong. I have trouble with my arithmetic. But once you get above that, it's sort of the case that there's a whole lot of birds there, and they're sitting there, and you count that little patch of them, and you come up with 20. And that patch is that big. So you go 2 patches, 3 patches, 4 patches. 4 patches for 20 is 80. And then the hard part comes in. Do I think it's more or less? So you go 79 or 81. Never put 80 in, I think you haven't counted. Or you can do the serious ones, where it's the person with a scope, and you've got the pen and paper. So we're going around this time, and we can sharp-tailed sandpipers. 7, 14, 21. Oh, there's 2 lapwings. 33, 42. Oh, look at the red-capped plovers. And they've got a chick. Isn't that great? Where are we up to? 63. So you do your arithmetic, you add those up. And, I mean, the reality is, if there's a group going, only one person's putting the data on the database. That's the person who has the final say. It's a bit like a camp. If you're not really sure that the bird is seen, and when you go in to enter it, it comes up extremely rare, please submit a submission. No, I'm not going to do that. Now, Anne talked about, she had the slide up there of Tonga. That's off the pipeline track. If you go to the end of the pipeline track, when I first started, you could look across to another pond whose name I don't know, but it was covered with birds. And you'd count them, and again, the same way, there's lots of them, 10 by 10. But one day, so there were 2 trees there. One tree only had cormorants on it. So it'd be pretty easy, there'd be 2 little pied cormorants and 1 pied cormorant. But one day we were there, and the tree at the back, and we saw this flock of tree martins fly in. And they flew down onto the tree, and we got common agreement that the number was 250. It's okay, 250 was a lot. So it wasn't, you know, and 250 is pretty good. Then there was a disturbance, and this flock flew up out of the tree, and it's at least twice as big as the ones that had gone in. So we said, oh, 500. And then somebody said to me, but look at the tree. Back down to the tree, there were still as many birds on the tree as in the air. So, 1,000 went in the database.
Hi everybody, I'm going to read you a little extract of my creative writing PhD. This is just like a crazy coincidence, but I have literally the same opening as Anjay. We didn't organise this. Never told you each other. So, I'll begin with a confession. When I joined Hunter Bird Observers Club last year, I wasn't a bird person. Slightly. Before joining the club, I spent most of my free time looking in rockpools. In 2020, when I started my PhD, I was living in town close to the beach. And I wanted to know the names of everything that I saw, so I downloaded the citizen science app iNaturalist and I started to teach myself. During the 2021 lockdown, I came across, do you guys say HBOC or HBOC? Because I've never known about it. HBOC. Yeah, it's okay. I say HBOC, some people say HBOC. Anyway. So I came across HBOC's pamphlet, Newcastle Wetlands Birding Route. I was curious about the Cocoin Hunter River estuary, so I set myself the goal of going to all the places on the pamphlet. But to access Hexham Swamp, I need to join the club. I almost joined then, but I got a little distracted by life. We moved house and had a baby. So, fast forward to March 2023. I signed up to attend a farewell shorebirds event at a place called Stockton Sandspit, but when the day came, I didn't go. Sneaking away from my family for a few hours hadn't seemed feasible. And I'd imagined that the sand pit, as I'd erroneously read, was hard to get to, somewhere out in the wilderness of the Stockton sand dunes on the Warramah conservation lands. Later in the week, when I was back to my usual routine of caring for my daughter, I regretted not going, so I emailed to ask if the migratory shorebirds would still be there after the weekend. You said farewell. Anne replied to say that she wasn't sure if the birds had left or not. She would add me to her list for the waterbird survey. And that was how I ended up under a bridge one rainy day, parking next to a mural of the bar-tailed godwit. I recognised it from a children's book that I'd found at the public library when I'd been there with my daughter, Circle by Jean Baker. Yeah, the story of the godwit's marathon flights had lodged in my mind. And while my daughter pushed books off the non-fiction stacks, another long-billed bird had eyed me from the cover of Harry Sadler's book, The Eastern Curlew. I read Sadler's account of how he had fallen in love with a bird with a beak as long as its body, a bird that flies from Siberia to Australia and back each year, 30,000 kilometres. A thought popped into my mind as I was driving over Stockton Bridge. Maybe I'll see an Eastern Curlew today. I wonder if there's a bird-watching equivalent of beginner's luck. I introduced myself to the survey party. They look up from the telescope for long enough to say a quick hello. I'm late. The bird count has already begun. Tom asks if I have much experience with bird watching. I stumble a reply. I barely know a thing about birds. Tom teases me. I'm a beginner, I admit. I don't think that my presence will be of much use, but I raise my binoculars anyway. And I see a flat, brown, muddy, nothing place with a sandy rim and a thin fringe of mangroves. Just across the river is a fertiliser plant and the back of a coal stockpile. It doesn't look like a place you'd associate with internationally significant Ramsar-listed wetlands and endangered migratory birds. In my mind, those words invite imagery of lush green places filled with clear ponds. I don't really understand what I'm looking at, how to recognise its value. Mudflats are underappreciated environments, perhaps because we've been led to believe that special ecological areas are always aesthetically pleasing. Half the time, mudflats aren't visible. Like coastal rock platforms, they are inundated twice daily by tidal flows. And when the tide is out, mudflats don't have that much appeal. The fine sediment does not readily offer up its riches. For that, you'd need to evolve a specialised bill. Tom reports the birds they've already counted. There's pied stilts, red-necked avocets, a few white-faced herons, and one eastern curlew. An eastern curlew, I say. I take it as a sign, but I'm not sure what it means yet. After this, the mania for naming things only gets worse. I download eBird and Merlin, but bird ID is harder than sea snail ID. I can't take a photo and upload it and let the AI do the work. I have to remember names and plumages and use my own eyes and ears. So at night, instead of streaming TV shows, I sit on a couch and scroll through the brightly coloured tiles and let the names of the birds fill my mind like a melody. Wandering whistling duck, sharp-tailed sandpiper, buff-banded rail. I try to remember the patterns and colours and shapes so that next time a bird suddenly appears, I'll be able to recognise it. I'll know it in the world because I saw it here in my hand and learned its name. More importantly, I have to rely on the knowledge of the experienced surveyors who are generous enough to teach me as we survey together. After the sandspit, I go to Hexham Swamp and Ash Island, and I'm just starting to get my confidence when I join the Tomago survey. Tomago is a bit of a disaster. I'm not used to wading through an actual swamp. My gumboots get stuck in the mud, and I fall over and get soaking wet and muddy, and I cry in front of scientists. And I have to do the walk of shame in waterlogged boots for another 2 hours. After this, I decided to stop being a tourist in the estuary and try to be a better surveyor. I realised that I've only been thinking about what I want to get out of these experiences. I haven't stopped to think about what I should do to support the club. And I decided that I should try to get to know one place, and I start going back to the sandspit. After a few more months of showing up to surveys and club meetings, the secretary entrusts me with a telescope. And now on survey days, I climb the fence at the farmer's property at Fulton Cove with Tom, and we walk through the field with our tripods on our shoulders. Bits of machinery and corrugated iron are scattered around. There are cows and goats, tractors and electric fences. We head towards a large oleander that will shield us while we spy on roosting birds. The scope allows me to see further than I ever have before, and it trains my attention on just one small area. This tiny strip of estuarine beach, not more than 10 metres across, is the highlight of the survey. It always surprises, Tom says. There's no overhead bridge, no highway, it's peaceful here. Just a few cows mooing, water lapping, stilts yapping. Tom points out a long-legged shorebird with a fine needle-like bill, a marsh sandpiper. Among a raft of teals riding choppy waves, 5 pink-eared ducks. Other people join the survey. One time, Tom's partner Juliana joins us. I've been looking at her bird photos on Instagram. One is a close-up of a little waterbird, a common backyard bird, with the caption, "Sometimes I hear people say, it's just a brown bird." For me, the detail is amazing. Her photo reveals the striking white shafts of its grey-brown feathers, and Juliana tells me that she has something for me. An enamel pin with a picture of 6 red-browed finches. The pin says, "I found my flock." Maybe I am becoming a bird person. Thanks.
I too have a confession to make. So we've been involved in surveys. It was great to see the history of it from these people and Anne, of the surveys on the dikes. So you've all seen the dikes here. Okay, my name's Greg for anyone who doesn't know. And so anyway, confess, we're doing a survey. Dan, myself and Louise, we're doing a survey in 2022 and we had an incident. And I should have made a report to it, and that's what I'm going to do tonight. And so anyway, so here we go. I'll try and make it quick. It was February 2022, Dyke Survey, Louise, Dan and Greg at the Bayground. You can hear me on nervous. A fine sunny mid-morning, light warm breeze on a gentle incoming tide. we launched a little light tinny, slowly motored a leisurely kilometre up the friendly Hunter River, searching intensely for shorebirds along the rocky dike wall. Louise with binoculars called godwits, knots, lapwings, curlews, Dan also searching, plus keenly recording all sightings in his hefty notebook. Greg with light hands skillfully skippering the cheerful little tinny. The agile little tinny slipped easily through a narrow gap in the dike wall to enter the broad, calm, mangrove-shrouded ponds. You've seen the ponds behind the dike walls on the pictures. Here Louise called greenshanks and stilts. Dan scribed diligently, and Greg guided the keen vessel over glassy water. It was beautiful. Between two ponds we putted softly along a warm, placid, mangrove-lined and lightly dappled channel. Mangrove geraniums tinkled in the leaves and crabs scuttled on the mud. The motor suddenly clumped loudly and the tinny jumped and stopped, but the motor was still running. With indignant zeal, Greg, me, revved the motor, but no go. Forward, reverse, no go, no propulsion, wouldn't go anywhere. We looked at each other, we looked around, what happened? We didn't know. The atmosphere became very quiet. The birds, even the crabs, paused. and watched transfixed with bright, anticipating eyes. From far below in the dark, muddy water, from deep among the mangrove roots, an angry cellulo-lignine monster had reached up and violently tore off the blades from the blades, 3 blades from the propeller of our unsuspecting, gentle and willing tinny. Awaiting the next attack, Greg's mind fizzed with visions of calamity. Staring forward, wide-eyed, clutching the gunnels, he started hearing strange sounds, unknown bird calls, beating drums and banjos. As skipper, details loomed of his own burial at sea. Dan sat bent to the notebook, heart beating fast and mind and body frozen, only his eyes shifting side to side, searching for the horrible cause. The most valuable to him was fading. His family, the annual bird report, and his beard, all fading. They're supposed to be at desk. Louise, unconcerned, scanned with binoculars and called 2 marsh sandpipers. Dan's mile-away eyes dropped to the notebook, but his hands wouldn't move. Eyes drifted back to the mangroves. Thus our world stopped. The wind cooled, waves splashed, and the tide became treacherous. Our minds began to grasp the seriousness of our stricken circumstances. We were probably doomed in an angry mangrove wilderness somewhere way up the wrathful Hunter River. Louise, unfazed, with hand on hip and a flick of hair, suggested with excessive and unwarranted logic that with a little effort, the 3 of us could paddle to the gap, pull the tinny out by the mooring rope, out into the river, and with the aid of the now outgoing tide, pull them and manoeuvre the boat up the dike, a short distance back to the dike wall, the boat ramp. Dan looked at Greg, who, thinking as fast as a limping glacier, nodded for a few moments and then said loudly, yeah, we thought of that. But they dismissed this preposterous and impractical idea from Louise. You see, they had the situation in hand, didn't we, mate? They pointed out with smiles and friendly tact, of course, that it would take days to drag that heavy, hateful boat out of the wild mangrove tangle and then several kilometres back to the boat ramp.
Just wanted to give my perspective of doing agile. I started doing agile 25 years ago, like Anjo with his going out to Hexham. I've been doing Ash Island for 25 years, apart from the dikes once and twice out to Tomago. Every other time it's been Ash Island, and I just love every time going out there, driving across the bridge to start the survey each month, thinking, what's it going to bring this time, right? You just never know when you go there until you go and do it. And that's, I just keep doing Ash Island for as long as I can.
As long as your body lets you.
So I've just got a couple of slides to wrap things up. Firstly, we're not really going to talk about results today, but and there is a presentation from a year or so ago that was playing here, and it's on the club's YouTube channel if you want to actually see detailed results. But the trends generally for the migratory shorebirds are declines, and in the majority of cases they are major declines or even massive declines, things like curlew sandpipers that used to be here in a couple of thousand, now we get 20 or 30 in the estuary. Both the curlew sandpiper and the far eastern curlew are now classified as critically endangered in the various conservation lists. That's just, 30 years ago, that's just mind-boggling that situation could have happened. So really bad news for those migratory shorebirds. A lot of that is due to things outside the hunter. It's the whole flyway and the pressures that those birds are under. But there are also problems here in the estuary, particularly Fortin Cove, which has got quite serious contamination, and that's having impacts that we can see on the birds that use Fortin Cove. But for the resident shorebirds, the news is generally positive. Most of those are doing at least steady, and most of them are in improving numbers. And the same goes to many other waterbird species, the ducks, things like whiskered terns and gold-billed terns and things which we used to find only occasionally. Now those birds have increased in numbers. That's because many good things have happened in the estuary over the years with the various rehabilitation projects, etc., and that has really benefited a lot of birds. That's enough in terms of results. We don't want to get too serious tonight. Okay, the next one, thanks. So I just wanted to summarise what are the achievements in 25 years. We've had roughly 200 people who participated. We actually, I think, no longer even keep count. There's just so many of them. Some people will only come for a little while and go away again. We've got lots and lots of people though, and you've heard some flavour of that tonight. People who've done multiple years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, long time surveyors. Really, I think it's the standout example of citizen science within Australia. The number of people, the effort, just maintaining that whole sort of thing is just fantastic. There's been, in the 25 years, a possible 300 surveys. We only have missed one of those, and that was in the Pasha Bulker storm in June 2007, when we basically couldn't get out for the entire month. That's the only one that's completely missing. But there are some where we didn't quite get the whole, every site covered. A couple of times we couldn't get the boats. A couple of times Tomago was closed. Or, there were sort of things that sometimes we couldn't get it all done, but that's a pretty small number. And even like during COVID, I think the question was asked earlier, we got everything covered because we weren't allowed to leave our LGA, but we organised for people to go out and do it and so forth. We couldn't get the boat for the dikes, but somebody walked out along the dikes and surveyed and counted as best they could from there. So we sort of got it all covered, apart from the Pasha Bulker storm in 2007, the only one that's knocked us around. In terms of the results, they go into the national databases and things that you've heard earlier tonight. But we've also, there's been 10 papers written that directly relate to results from the surveys. There's been other things like storks at Tomago and so forth on top of that, but 4 papers in Stilt, 1 in Emu and 5 in the Whistler that describe in some aspect of the results from our survey. So that's, we're not only just doing the work and getting into the national database, but we're actually interpreting it and using that information to lobby for things to get changed, etc. And of course there's been lots of other presentations, as well as the papers at various forums that people have made, big net meetings, Australian Ornithological Conferences, all sorts of things where the results have been presented. Data go into the national shorebird database within bird data, and then they're used in the shorebird, the national reckonings of how populations are going and so forth, so that's an important contribution. And I think this for me, the most important outcome really is that the data and the knowledge that we've accumulated from knowing where birds are, etc., has really kick-started quite a number of projects within the estuary for rehabilitation. Ash Island, time ago, the Sandspit, Hexham. Those things may have happened without us, but they certainly happened a lot more readily and with better outcomes for birds because of what we were doing on the estuary. So I think 25 years we've achieved a lot, and who knows what the next 25 years is going to bring. Okay.